Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're delighted to have you here with us today. I am Elisa Sklar. I'm a strategic communications and marketing consultant, and I'm excited to be here today on this local Intel webinar. We are going to be looking at the 10 musts of AI for economic development. So you've been hearing a lot about AI. We're really going to think about configuring it specifically to an economic development context for you today. I'm delighted to be here today with Steve Kirby. Steve is the VP of Sales and Partnerships at Local Intel. He's there in the background running things and helping out with all the technical elements. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Alyssa. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Really excited to do this today. It's going to be a very practical look. And our goal here is to really give you a set of questions that you can use as you consider economic development, use of AI for economic development. And that's really important because we know when we work with economic developers, with anyone in city, county, state, governments of any kinds, public-private partnerships, that security and knowing that your data is absolutely bulletproof is really, really critical. And we know that oftentimes there are very strict policy controls that you might have in your organization about integrating new tools, especially with AI. There's a lot of question marks. And so there is a certain amount of wondering about how do we make this work for us and how do we yet fit this in, because we also know there's a massive productivity and efficiency boost. It just unlocks so much creativity. And really, quite frankly, our goal is to help you free up the time that you've got. Your days are so busy doing so many things, to cultivate relationships, to work with your businesses, with your area stakeholders, with prospective investors, whatever that actually is, your partners. So how do we help you produce this content faster, more quickly, but safely and securely at the same time? So that's basically what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be showing you lots of different tools wherever possible. I try to choose tools that are either free or extremely affordable, because I also recognize that budgets are a concern. So let's dive in here. We're going to dive in with thinking about AI. Quite frankly, when we speak to economic developers, what we hear from them is concerns about inaccurate data, about hallucinations, about errors, about inconsistencies, and the damage this can actually do to your brand and to your organization. And we also recognize at the same time that this technology is so new that policy in your organization may not have evolved to account for it. And that means when I speak with economic development folks from all over, they may not have a framework for how do you evaluate AI tools. They're changing all the time. This is happening so quickly. So having that framework, that's part of what we're trying to give you today, is this kind of framework for evaluating them and knowing what questions to ask so that it actually fits in properly and avoids some of the most common pitfalls with these tools. So let's dive in. We're going to start with really far and away the most important thing is verified, secure, up-to-date data. And the easiest way to ensure that you are drawing from data that is safe to use, that is not going to have errors or not going to be out of date, is to have a closed set of data. So most large language models, most artificial intelligence tools draw from a massive data set. Often they're drawing just from the internet, everything that's out there. And we all know for our time on the internet that there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't reliable or might actually just be plain wrong. Sometimes there's inconsistencies, and these algorithms have to factor all of those things in at the same time. Most AI models are looking at the most recent content sources. So that's good maybe for things that are up to date, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the most recent thing is correct, because as we said, there's a lot of stuff online that isn't necessarily accurate. So having this closed set is the safest way to do that. We're defining from the beginning what data is actually being programmed in there. So the one I always use as an example when we start here, some of you may be familiar with it if you're in a Google Workspace, this is free to use, is Notebook LM. And Notebook LM is a Google product, and that basically you upload the sources. So here's an example where I created a notebook. So each different task has its own notebook. And I put in 3 different sources, some PDFs, the slide deck that I'm using, something else that I'd written up, and I'm asking it to actually go in and create information, give me a rundown here that I can then look at. And then it can create all kinds of different things over here, an audio overview, a slide deck, a podcast, infographic, a quiz. That maybe a quiz would be a little bit odd, but there's all kinds of interesting things you can. Now, this is not perfect by any means, but it is really an interesting way to make sure that you are doing creative things with something that you've defined the data set for. So in this case, I asked it to put together an infographic. I can choose the orientation, I can choose some visual styles and the kind of detail, and boom, this is what it did in the matter of a few seconds. Is it necessarily perfect? No, it's not. I had put in data that said 10 musts and it came up with 6 musts for professional adoption. So it still requires that you go back and think about your prompts that you're putting in, but nevertheless, that's pretty cool. The next thing I asked it to do was to create a short explainer video. So here we go. We're gonna play that for a few seconds. This is what it did.
Okay, so we are constantly bombarded with marketing hype about the next big AI solution, right? Every day there's a new game changer. But how do you actually select the right tools for your organization without just guessing? Well,
So there is kind of an AI voice here that, like, maybe 2 years ago, this was like, wow, that's absolutely amazing. Now I hear that and my mind immediately says AI, but that's not terrible. I think it's pretty good. It has the nonverbal pauses. It says things like okay to start off, somebody's programmed that. And actually, in some cases, when you have something very complex and you don't have a big budget for creating video, that could be a really interesting way to put together a short explainer video. So NotebookLM has a variety of different things that you can generate from there. And if you pay a little bit extra, it removes the NotebookLM watermark that's on there. But in some cases, that's fine. The local intel tool is another one. It's really the only one that I know of at the moment that is specifically for economic development that has this closed data set. So they are defining the only data that their algorithm is allowed to use. They have programmed the algorithm in such a way that it is cognizant of what economic developers are looking for. So we know this data is always trustworthy, that it is always verifiable, that it is up to date and easy to cite. And that's something that you really need to be looking for. So here's an example for US communities of the data sources. You can see the update frequency, and they're going to be cited in the different tools and charts, graphs, reports that we're looking at. So I'm not going to go through all of these questions, but for point number one, this is an example of some of the questions that you're going to want to ask when you're looking at different tools or interrogating vendors about what is actually in their AI tool. And as I said, in the follow-up here, you're going to get a checklist and you'll get the access to the slide deck so that you can look through there. And one of the things I want to point out to you at the end is how do we ensure that any information that we might upload stays private and secure or isn't used to train the AI model? That is something you want to always check with, especially if there's any chance you're uploading your own proprietary data and you don't want that in there. So we know the data set should ideally be closed. That's something we're looking for. The next thing that we want to think about is source transparency and citation, because anything that then is an output, we want to make sure we can trace it back to the specific data. You know you're going to have someone somewhere, either a potential investor or a business person or a partner who's going to say, where did you get that information from? And so you're always going to want to look for that. And one of the AI tools that I really like using is called Perplexity. I like Perplexity because even in the free model, it always has the citation in there. And I really like that I can dig in there, search for errors. You can also ask it for all of the citations. So this is an example of something that I asked it about Florida's talent pipelines and key sectors. And these were some of the data sources that it gave me. Similarly, on the local intel tool, you'll see in the blue box that on the blue rectangle on the bottom right, all of the data. So as an example of one of the stories that can be generated with AI in their closed data set, always going to have the source and the date so that you can track those things. Similarly, for the visuals, you're always going to be able to look back, source and date, or these are the things that you're going to want to see. And as we choose the different ones, it's going to let us go back and search those. So for each thing that you might choose to add into a report or put on your website, that will always be reflected. That's really one of the things you want to be sure that you're including. And this is what it looks like, for example, on a chart in the chart builder that you could put out, you can see on the two bottom arrows, both the source and the date. Some questions to ask about citation is, what does it include these things? Can you see an example of what those citations look like? And is it possible to follow up on the citations to verify? Verify, verify, verify is really one of the cardinal rules when we're talking about AI tools. The next thing we really want to think about is voice. This needs to be professional and it needs to make sense for an economic development context. So it needs to be polished, it needs to be credible, and it needs to be suitable for the kinds of audiences that you're going to be speaking to. Now, this is different than if you were, say, a high school teacher or a college instructor, or if you were, I don't know, giving a presentation you wanted to be funny, for example. We really want to make sure this also isn't generic business prose, that kind of dull, robotic prose. Now, I am a big fan of Claude. I love the way it describes their various styles. Buttery, apparently I choose buttery. I'm not sure entirely what that means, but it seems to work for me. So you need to want to be playing around with those, and it does give you different kinds of outputs based on that. So that is quite a useful thing to look at. Now, you also want to be able to personalize. So I have over time built very detailed personalization into the background of my Claude. This is some example, challenge my thinking, expose flaws in my logic, speak politely, but don't automatically validate me. This is part of a much longer personalization text that I have actually put in there. And I think it's really important that you think about those outputs. And that's one of the things that I like about Claude is it allows me to do that. The other really interesting thing that a tool like this let you do is to create a custom voice. So in Claude, you have projects. You can go into a project and upload a number of things that you have written or that have been written for your organization and ask the tool to define the voice and create rules for that custom voice and then save it. So here are some of the things that it identified in things that I've written over time. And I can then use that to make sure that the things that I am using when I am generating content or polishing content or proofreading content is that it uses that custom voice. That's super helpful. The other thing I like about Claude, because occasionally we want to think about translations, is that you can really make it translate to a specific dialect. So, for example, I know that Brazil is a huge source of potential investment into the Southeast US. You want to have Brazilian Portuguese, not, Portuguese that's spoken in Portugal, for example. So asking it to do translations and then always checking. We're going to keep saying that. You always need to be checking. So similarly, this is something that you'll see in the new local Intel AI content engine. As it generates reports like the sample that you see up there in front of you, it's always using language that is appropriate for a professional audience. And we're going to show you afterwards some examples about how you can actually customize that if you choose to do so. Accuracy and time savings is really critical here. So you want to be able to, once you have good content, to then go in and say, okay, I really like this, but I want to be able to use it for this kind of audience, or I want it to be more optimistic or more casual or more formal, for example. So in the background of the story builder in the local Intel content engine, you can modify that voice and think about what that is. You can modify the length. There's all sorts of ways you can actually go in and change the tone and change the style as well. And that also gives you different kinds of content. It might be similar information, but it may be presented in different kinds of ways that will be more or less appropriate for different things over time. Some questions to ask here is, do your outputs sound bland or generic? Do they show the things that we like, the dreaded M dashes, the antithesis framing that we've learned to expect from AI content? It's not this, it's that. It's not X, it's Y. Choppy paragraph blocks. There's all sorts of things that we're learning are kind of hallmarks of AI. We want to be looking for that, making sure the tone of voice is always appropriate for your brand, for your audience, and that you can change it to suit the tone. Now, it's one thing for it to have that in terms of the language that it's using, but it also needs to look really good. It needs to be appropriate to economic development. Now, many of you on this call are going to have the luxury of having on-call, maybe in-house graphic designers, professional designers. I'm always a big fan of using humans. There is no question about it. They're going to understand things in a way that an AI, I'm not sure, will ever be able to grasp. But we don't always have the luxury to do that, whether it's budgetary resources or time. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can take advantage of making sure that it has professional design, look and feel, and that it also reflects your brand style, your visual identity. So, as an independent consultant who does not have a graphic designer on staff, I have asked Claude to look at different things, and I did work with a graphic designer to design some visual identity elements and create a brand kit that I can use. And then this brand kit is something that I can use in any different AI tool. It's got my primary and secondary colors, my fonts, my logos, and things that I can take with me. Most likely your organization has that. So if you're using a tool such as Canva, for example, which will be familiar to many of you because it also has a freemium model, it's made design much more accessible for a lot of people, and it has all these beautiful templates. There's a new add-in in Canva called Affinity by Canva that also has some freemium models that allows you to really do quite sophisticated visual design. But you should be inputting make sure your logo's in there, your brand colors, your style kit, so you can add those things in there. Another free tool that I love is Prezi. Prezi has added a lot of AI elements. It's got different kinds of designers in the background that you can use. And this is an example of one of the things that you could choose from to help design things. And you see the tab up on the very top. It allows you also to upload your own brown kit, just like Canva does. Two examples. So there's something that I had some data points and I quickly pull it together an infographic using one of their templates based on data that I had. So not being a graphic designer and yet being able to produce this GIF that, that attracts a little bit of attention makes things very enjoyable and quite easy. Now, on the local intel side, one of the things that we've seen is the ability to do that in different ways. So the reports are very clean, they're very aesthetically pleasing, they're absolutely professional. You can choose the different kinds of content here. So you'll see on the screen, you can drag and drop. You can use one of the load presets at the top. Right now, we've got workforce profile, but there's a lot of different ones in there. Or you can remove all of these things and choose the ones. Maybe you got a call from your city council and said, I need a report on these 3 employments by sector. I need to know the employment for advanced manufacturing. I need to know a few things about this particular sector. You could pull them together very quickly and be able to generate a report that you know is always going to look and feel clean and have the right kind of look to it. Similarly, you know that the local Intel widgets, many of you will be familiar, these are interactive data visualizations that can live on your website or can be put into other kinds of presentations, and you have a lot of ways to choose from them. They could be charts, they can be lists. You can choose the traded industries, you can use all industries and grab different elements from there to make those fit together. Some questions that you're going to want to ask when you're looking at different tools and you're speaking with vendors or things that you've got here on the page that you want to be able to take into account, because not all of them are going to be suitable for economic development. Brand customization. So we talked a little bit about that now, but we want to make sure that you've got the customization option for your voice, for both the language elements, but also the visual identity for there. So I was talking about Canva before and your ability to customize the different elements over there on the screen so that you can choose them and have them at your fingertips to grab them quickly as you're putting reports together. One of the things I love about the new local Intel platform is that it allows you to present charts in different ways. Maybe you want your pie chart to be pink. Maybe you want it to be a graph if it's the right kind of data. Maybe it is a bar chart. And being able to present things in a way that is part of your visual identity, knowing the hex codes, for example, that you should be using to share things is really important. Similarly, for tone, you'll see here the example to choose the different elements that you've got on the page and then be able to, make it seem this is the kinds of thing we want to look at this sector, we want to look at the county, we want to compare with the entire country, for example, this particular sector within this industry. You're actually able to choose both the kinds of information that go in there, but also the voice and way it's going to be presented. So here's some of the questions that we want to think about, particularly when it comes to the suitability of the data. Is it customized for us? Is it the right date range? And how do we modify this setting so it looks distinctive for our region and for our municipality, and make sure that's something that is appropriate for our town? Now, the fully editable piece is important too, because if it's just pumping out the same kinds of output all the time, that isn't quite as sophisticated as what some of the things that we know that are there. Flourish, super interesting tool with lots of beautiful templates that you can go into. I'm not, in the interest of time, I'm not going to click over to this, but this is an example where you can add your data in the background. It shows you how to do that, and it'll create these really beautiful visuals to help you generate what that actually looks like. So templates are really helpful. Opus Clips, another really interesting AI video software. You can put clips in there and it lets you, let's say you've got a half an hour webinar, for example, and you want to find 3 or 4 interesting little 1 minute, 30-second clips that you can use on social media, on LinkedIn. It will help identify them, and then you can edit them and you can generate a little clip like this one, for example. Let's see.
A lot of talk about tariffs, but it isn't always entirely clear what economic developers can do about them.
So that little promo clip for a webinar that I did last year for TEDC was very easy and fast to generate using something like Opus Clips. There is a very small cost at extremely affordable things you want to think about. Now, on the local intel tool, you can, let's say you're in stories, you can see we're in the AI content platform here. You can download the draft on the stories, and then you can go in and make it your own. So one of the things that I often suggest, for example, is adding quotes. And this is something that I completely just made up here, but adding a City of Vermilion mayor quote, the head of the Economic Development Organization, the head of the local Realtors Association, or whoever it is. Adding that little bit of local color is a great ability to do that. Because this becomes a Word document, you can go in and quickly and easily add things, and you still have the story that you've defined in order to be able to put that out there. And including people is always a really nice touch. That's one thing that I do often recommend in terms of best practices. So can we edit the outputs? Can we choose what goes in there? Can we modify geography? Some really important questions to ask here. Now, ease of use and integration, super important. If you have to spend a lot of time training, that's going to be problematic. You want it to be fast and easy because staff turns over, and frankly, who has the time to do a ton of training? There's some amazing tools out there, but we want things that are fast and easy. I love Prezi for that. These are templates. You drop in your data and you can quickly put something that looks quite eye-catching and sophisticated in there. But similarly, in local intel, because it is set up with everything at the top, there is literally no training involved, and there is really extremely responsive reports, so you can go back and add anything that you want to put in there. How complex is it to learn? How long does it take? Is there an onboarding process, or can you just, open, click, and away you go? And what kinds of support are available? And if there is staff turnover, how do we ensure that the new staff is easily brought up to speed? Sometimes there is training involved, and we don't always want to do that every few months or every few years as new folks come in. Consistency across teams and departments, very important. Especially economic development rarely works in a vacuum. You're either reporting to council, or you're part of, a municipality in a region, maybe a council of governments, or you're all reporting to the city, for example, city and various departments within there. You want to make sure that you're all drawing from the same data source, and you want to understand everything correctly. So I put in a couple examples here of places where you can add complex documents. Economic developers were often asked to be experts on everything. You may not know a lot about, I don't know, metallurgy or some new type of industry sector that seems to be growing. So there's some fantastic AI teaching assistants. Khan Academy is one that I love. Just explain it like I'm 5 is fantastic. I love this one. You could define how simple it can be. Explain like you're 5, or you're like a 5th grader, or a high schooler, or a college graduate. And that is really wonderful because sometimes it helps us be brought up to speed quickly and easily. Everybody should have something like Grammarly or Quillbot to make sure there's no typos, misspellings, semantic errors. and things that are fairly simple and easy to use. So the local intel, this is what it looks like when you log in, and it gives you this kind of featured, your profiles, your stories, your aspects, your reports. You can just scroll down. All the headers are up there at the top. It really makes it very easy to look at it, and you get these kind of thumbnails. So it becomes like a library. Really, it's the AI version of your own customized library of content that is there ready for you to use. So some great questions to ask if you're going to be adopting this as a city, across your county, across your organization, that everybody is using the same data and output, that you can trust that the algorithm is appropriate for your context, often economic development, municipal, county business, and that you don't need to worry about errors and hallucinations because you know it understands your data. And how easy is it to ensure that consistency is an important question to ask. Transparency on use limits and costs. Maybe you've seen some of the stories I've seen recently where folks are suddenly getting hit by huge bills because they don't realize that some AI tools only provide a certain number of tokens, for example, or usage limits or seats. And sometimes that spirals out of control. And there are ways around this. You could be using projects. You don't want to have long conversations with your AI tool, like Claude, for example. Each question really should be its own new chat in order to avoid that. But as an organization, you are responsible for ensuring that you don't run that up. So when you speak to your vendor, is there a limit to how much use our team is allowed to use? Is there a limit to how many seats we get? Are there any hidden extras or hidden costs? This is an unfortunate thing that you need to think about. And you really want to make sure that is not the case. And how do we track them if there are those limits? Really important questions to ask. And finally, the one I'm going to end on here, which is human review, absolutely must be built into your process. Despite all the legitimate fears out there, I think it is absolutely critical to ensure that we have human eyes on all AI generated content before it goes out. So a few last slides I want to share with you. One is if you are using AI generated content, that you be transparent about it. Here are some example of little phrases you can include. This was AI generated, but human reviewed. It was an image produced with AI. It was used to help our team with research and writing of this document, an AI generated image. Another thing that you want to think about is defining your whys for using AI. We're using it because of efficiency. It lets us do things faster and a lot less cost. It lets us enhance our productivity. Now we can do an email newsletter once a month, whereas before we just did not have the time to be able to do that. It helps us analyze large data sets and stay up to date. It helps unleash creativity that we wouldn't otherwise have the people or the budgets for. And defining your scope. Are there certain things that you as an organization are not, red lines you are not going to cross? So cases that should be considered out of bounds. In any organization, you want to make sure that any AI content is always reviewed. You should designate a person in every team and department who is your point person to do that review. So it's always clear that it's going to go to Elisa or it's going to go to Steve. Any public-facing content that is generated by AI might require senior level review. So that's something that you might want to think about. And having the checklist for reviewers. The truth is, even if it's human content, you still need to be checking for spelling errors, for mistakes, for tone. This doesn't really change that. It just ensures that we don't have this level of comfort that says we can just publish everything that AI generates for us. And finally, these are some of the questions that you want to think about. Do you have an AI protocol in place? This is one of the things that I coach organizations on how to do that and do something that is appropriate for an economic development organization, that everyone understands these things. Do you have specific objectives for using AI content, or you just want to do it because it's cool? Have you appointed someone to be the person who reviews content at different levels before it gets used? And do you have any checks in place to ensure that it is periodically reviewed as new tools come out and new capabilities are introduced? So this is the kind of final AI evaluation checklist. I am very happy to, I know we're right up at the end here, but I'm happy to take any questions. Maybe you'll help me out with that, Steve, and we'll see if there's any questions there. I also just want to say, if you are interested in learning more about the Local Intel AI content engine, you can reach out to book a demo, info@localintel.com. I see that we have a couple of things in there. So some examples. Someone's talking about Power BI. I don't know that one for
Power
interactive.
Power BI, that's I think that's a Microsoft tool, isn't it?
Okay.
So yeah, I'm assuming that question was directed at a comparison between Power BI and Local Intel's solution. And I can talk to that. So
Yeah.
basically, Power BI is great for interactive analysis, KPI monitoring. Think of Local Intel more as a library of publishable ready content that you can push out across all channels. Okay, so whether we're talking about print, website, email, social media, newsletters, it's all ready to go, all curated beautifully, like having your own graphic designer on staff, ready to go. So that's kind of the main difference between Local Intel and Power BI.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a really good point, actually, because I actually think the archive or the library of content that has been generated based on that closed data set is a critical way to think about it because it's doing the analysis, it's doing the
Mhm.
research, doing the analysis, doing the writing, doing the design. But there are some really interesting and really powerful analytical tools out there. They still leave it to you to do the write-up and to do the design. And maybe that's appropriate for your organization. But that is one of the things that you really want to be thinking about. We often get that question, don't we, Steve?
Mm,
What is the
yeah.
difference between, for example, the local intel tool and Claude? I mean, Claude is really powerful and certainly has its place. I use it all the time. But it doesn't kind of give you that kind of turnkey archive or library, if you will, of content that's ready to go. Um, so it's really about thinking about your whys. What is it that you need to use this for? What are the most important things? For many economic developers, we know that it's content. I mean, you have to produce so much content in economic development. You have to respond to the potential investor, put together the response to the RFP, give your city council the talking points to use at the next meeting, speak to your local businesses, do a presentation on your key sectors, whatever those things are. And all of that just takes time. And like many economic developers, you're probably doing that on a fairly small staff. I know some of you out there are like, I am the only staff. I do all of the things. And so that really makes it a kind of bottleneck because there's only so many hours in a day and there's only so much capacity out there to get this done. So these tools are really powerful. They really help you to enhance that. Understanding what it is that you're looking for is the main thing, but also addressing the concern and anxiety that a lot of economic development organizations and city, county governments have around AI is to enter into it in a safe and secure way. And I would say that probably the best way to do that when you start is to enter with a closed data set where you define what the data is. It's not drawing from the big, bad, exciting, but kind of scary internet out there. We know exactly what they are. We can cite them. We can trust them. We also ensure that it's not using our own data in ways that, affect compliance or affect classified confidential information that may be used to train language models. Those are important. If we can satisfy those initial fears, then it makes it easier to get used to using AI tools in ways that enhance your productivity, but do that more safely. I know we've come up against the end of our half-hour time here. We had a lot of content for you, and I'm really excited to answer any questions you might have. You can reach out to us at info@localintel.com with any questions that we didn't get to. And as you get the video and the checklist, you'll be welcome to do that as well. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join us, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you. And thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. Thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully we get to
Bye.
talk. Cheers. Bye.